Greetings and welcome to the IHHA Quadcast, a unique space where four distinct voices merge to present a unified, holistic perspective. Our conversations, while deeply rooted in nature, are steered by the wisdom of seasoned experts in the realm of holistic wellness. Today, we're delving into the detailed framework of the human body and mind. We're moving beyond the basics. We're examining the essence, the foundational interplay of our physical and neurological functions. With us is Dr. Jeffrey Essen, the esteemed president and co-founder of the International Holistic Health Alliance. His insights and leadership have been instrumental in charting the course for many in the holistic health community. And our special guest, none other than the brilliant Michael Stern, a luminary in the realm of neurologically based soft tissue work. Michael offers a unique lens through which we can understand therapies from a central nervous system perspective. Get ready as we navigate the intricacies of the nervous system. Whether you've got a notepad or just a cup of tea, come along for this informative exploration. Listen in and gear up for some valuable insights.
Welcome to the IHHA Quadcast. I thought it was a great opportunity to have an introduction to Dr. Michael Stern, who is a good friend of mine. We see each other as patients. We've been friends and compadres here for a long time. And I really want to introduce him to people so that people can better understand what he does, because I think his work is both unique and powerful, and I think that more people should know about it. So I'm going to have Michael just kind of give you a brief introduction of how he got into chiropractic to begin with, and then some of the history about how he's moved to where he is now. So Michael, just kind of give us that bullet point of how did this all start, and how did you get to your point where you are now?
Yeah, well, this chiropractic is a second career for me. I was a computer programmer analyst in the Wall Street area of New York for several years. But at the same time, I had received chiropractic from an old buddy of mine who had just graduated chiropractic school. And I had a major change, good, positive change. And so for a number of years, it was always in the back of my head to become a chiropractor.
So where did you attend chiropractic school?
So here in Minnesota, which, there's about 15 chiropractic schools around the country. And so I moved out here from New York. And
there's a shot.
Right. It's, but it worked out because I found my passion, not from what I studied at Northwestern per se, but in postgraduate type seminars.
And what seminars were those? How did you move into that?
Yeah. Well, my mentor, soon to be mentor, was bringing a seminar to town. And I just had to be there. And I have no idea why that happened. Like, it was magic. Yeah. And later on, years later, I found out I had subscribed to a chiropractic journal years before I even went to chiropractic school. And I held on to three articles, three magazines that had articles in it, turned out by my mentor. So to me, it was destined to happen. But what he was doing was so different than, what most chiropractors are out there doing.
Sure. Yeah, and I've experienced your work, and I've recognized it to be completely off the base of what I've seen from traditional chiropractic. Yeah. And I know that there's probably 24 versions of, some specialized application of chiropractic. There's many different styles, is what you could call them. What would you say is your style? How would you name and brand that?
There's many different techniques. There's probably 100 techniques in chiropractic, and in the traditional schools, you really get a couple of the techniques, and you can choose on your own to go study somewhere else the other techniques. Yeah. So I would say my style, and this, began with my mentor coming to town, founded Network Chiropractic, And the word network stands for the whole body being a network, the nervous system being a network of all the different systems. And but also it was a network of chiropractic techniques. So I've taken that work that I learned from him and was on his staff for a number of years, and I molded it a little bit for what I believe more of what my patients were looking for. And that is an unwinding of the nervous system, not high force, actually relatively low force, and connecting all parts of the nervous system. And as a whole entity, what we typically do in all kinds of body work, including chiropractic, is we focus in our favorite area. So, for example, some people like their bones moved because it gives them the release of endorphins, and but some people that would be too much for. They just need some release of musculature and connective tissue. So it's learning to recognize what a person's nervous system is saying and what it requires at that point.
So you're adjusting to the individual level of need for the person, as opposed to many chiropractors are simply doing the same adjustments on every single person who comes in, no matter what their condition.
Yeah, and that's where chiropractic perhaps gets somewhat of a bad rap, because you're not looking at a high level technique level what each individual needs. You're kind of delivering the same thing.
And from a testing standpoint here in my office, I test people for their needs for body work. And more often than not, what seems to come up is the gentle version of chiropractic, your kind of work, or even the little activators.
Yep.
The rotational crunching of the bones is not necessarily what the body wants. Even despite how it might feel good, it might be very good for pain relief, might give that immediate sensation of getting better. But it seems like some chiropractic might be traumatizing tissue that's already traumatized.
Yeah, for sure.
And so in that case, your work, and from my experience of it and watching you work with other people, is tuning into their body. And there's this concept that you talked about called rapport.
Yeah.
Can you describe that?
Sure. Rapport is the place or places you're being invited into the body to put some input into the body and nervous system. A good analogy would be, have you ever hugged someone and they melted in your arms? From that hug, that connection. That's an example of having great rapport. Versus, have you ever come across a person who you might have tried to hug and they tightened up? That's the body saying, no, I'm overwhelmed. Please not now. Kind of thing.
Okay.
So part of what I do is find the different places of rapport, and that changes from contact to contact, literally. So places that were uninviting initially maybe open up and are inviting.
Right. And I've seen you do your work, and it's been done on me, where you'll start off in that place of good rapport, and there are areas that are just too tight to adjust. They just aren't going to respond.
Right.
And so you work the area that is inviting and get connection, get the brain to acknowledge that area, and then suddenly all of that tightened up area that wasn't responding is now then open. So it's like I said, it's an opening up of the acceptance of the body to this kind of technique, which takes a while to do. Some chiropractors can be done with their adjustments in about 5 minutes. You might have to work with somebody for a while.
True. It can be 5 minutes too sometimes, but it could be longer.
And I've seen you also do an adjustment, and then take a break of time and just let the thing kind of settle in and observe the patient, watch their breath and all this kind of stuff. What's your process of thought and observation there?
Yeah, you want to input in a place that you're being invited into with the idea that the body mind will take what you've input and work it and create change. And that requires some processing time. So it's not one contact after the next, after the next. Sometimes it's a little like that, but mostly it's contact and see what the body does with it. And you can measure that. You can look at the tension in the nervous system. Has it changed? Has it changed for the better? Or has it even changed for the worse? In which case, you probably were in the wrong place. And in general, this concept isn't how chiropractors are trained. So it's really unique to what I've learned from my mentor.
And I've seen you do techniques, again, on myself and others, where, this might be an adjustment.
Yeah.
That doesn't move any bones around. That's just doing what?
Well, again, the nervous system actually, I'll ask people, what is a nervous system? What does it do for you? And most of us don't really have an answer for it. But the truth of the matter is, the nervous system connects to every cell in your body. So you can use different areas that you're being invited into to give it some input. And there's a whole brain-body language to it too. It's like, is it going to be light touch? How light? What's the duration of a contact? And then, of course, you've measured the tensions in the body. What does the body then do with it? And the net effect should be less tension and more connection between brain and body. And then you move on and see what the body wants. What's your invitation into next?
Sure. In other words, you literally have to complete a step to understand what the next step is.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's very dynamic process.
It's been my observation is that again, it individualizes it not only to the person, but for the session. The person might come in the next time and not get the same adjustments because their body's responding differently next session along.
Exactly. Yeah. And the body, to understand, is not a mechanical machine. It has you in it. It's, there's a life force to it. And I try to honor that, the wholeness of a person. Physically, the nervous system touches, physically, but mentally, emotionally as well.
Yeah. And now there is some tie-in too, and we're going to be teaching the energetics course in our naturopathic school. Yeah. The idea of the meridians and the chakras and the just overall energy communication system of the body. How does your work interface with that?
Well, it does. The nervous system touches upon all of that, and I'll give you one huge example. You've heard of craniosacral work, right? Well, that's working with the cerebral spinal fluid flow, which, flows through the central canal of the nervous system of the spine. And so, and most chiropractic doesn't take that into account. So it's whole other fields, I try to incorporate that along with the meridians and the energy system of the body and evaluate how that's coming along with each contact. So it's like the way I look at it, what I do is like the greatest hits of body work, including chiropractic, but not exclusive to it.
Right, so this is energy work, say something in the neighborhood of Reiki or other energy techniques combined with some actual physical techniques, some emotional techniques, kind of all wrapped up into one set of things that you do. So when you're assessing somebody, this is, let's say, your first time with this person, you have to kind of look at what is their physiological, what is their metabolic, what is their nervous system, what's their hormones. You have to take all that into account try to put that into a whole being.
Right, into assessing really the sum total of their nervous system,
Right.
And their life.
And which is, for holistic practitioners who we're mainly speaking to, that's no new concept, but that doesn't make it easier. That's a tough thing to do, is not tune into somebody that much.
Right.
Now, I've observed you being able to tune into people to the point where you can just look at somebody and understand their nervous system and understand what's happening and going on inside them without even putting your hands on them.
Right.
Is that something you can teach? Is that something that you just happen to have that talent? Describe that.
Well, I was a computer guy in the Wall Street area, I had to learn from the floor on up. And so it is something you can learn and become more adept at reading those energies, along with the very gross, real tensions in the body.
Sure. Now, one of your talents is to be able to teach people how to do this kind of work, but without the legal complication of moving bones, which is technically you have to have a license to do that.
Yes.
But there's techniques that you can use outside of moving bones. So that's something that we're going to be using in our hands-on HHP course. You're teaching your technique there. Describe then how you would teach somebody to do this process without actually doing, subluxation adjustments.
Yeah, well, again, evaluating the tensions in the body, the musculature, the bones themselves. Bones carry tension too. And does the joints and the spine go through its full range of motion, or is there restriction? Is the person breathing? Or there are places that they're not breathing so well. The upper back, for example, has the nerve innervation to the heart, to the heart center. So it's usually, the first area that we're protective with, consciously or unconsciously, as we grow into our bodies.
So people could be all sort of locked up like this.
Yeah, and then I know they're prone to, heart events. Or also lungs are in that area of innervation.
That may have tension headaches, can even have ear problems.
Well, often the cranial sacral, the cerebral spinal fluid flow doesn't get completely up into the neck and head because there's blockage, interference in the upper back.
Yeah.
It's not a neck problem per se, or it's actually there's interference to CSF flow going up the spine.
Yeah. So again, all these interconnected, multiple layered, interactive components have to be considered. And then as you take somebody from, you see them the first time, you've assessed all this to be done the work, kind of describe the progression that somebody might go through. And at its ultimate endpoint, what kind of, spectacular examples have you seen with you? What kind of, could you give us an example of a person who went from complete tension to complete lack of tension?
I've seen that, but I'm thinking I had a patient who had a brain injury and knocked her head against a lamp or something and was basically in bed for a full year, outside of going to every practitioner under the sun for about a year trying to get well. And within just a handful of visits, they were up out of bed. And I'm told she was water skiing in Fiji a month later on vacation.
Oh.
Yeah. And again, it's realizing, bones don't have to be moved to get a result, but tissues need to be unwound. Ease needs to come in, life force. And a person needs to be more parasympathetic to heal. And, I would say someone who is not getting well, who's trying to get well by doing a number of things, but it's not really getting there, their nervous system isn't being completely addressed properly.
And that was kind of one of my other questions was, there seems to be the old chiropractic model that was developed, B.D. Palmer was the guy who initiated the whole thing. Some people argue whether he invented it or not. But still, he was the one who put it into popular practice. And it was all about this idea of move the bones into place, and if you move the bones into place, then everything else follows that. But it seems as though we've reached a plateau of that, and that there needs to be additional levels on top of moving the bones, or in place of moving the bones.
Yeah.
So where would you see chiropractic as a overall discipline, moving from where it was to how do we meet the needs of the future?
Yeah. Yeah, and that talks to how nervous systems are different than 100 years ago. Think about all the different stresses we have now. Maybe 100 years ago, it might have been more of a physical stress.
People were farmers and they were working hard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Today, it's much less that. And so, can we see how the stresses, the mental, emotional stresses get embedded into the nervous system? And then what do you do about it? And again, these unwinding techniques that have been around chiropractic and body work, like craniosacral work, like myofascial release, like Ralphing, like Traeger. There's a number of different techniques out there in the body work world. And can you combine things in a way that moves a person along, gets them out of fight or flight, and gets them more into parasympathetic mode where they can breathe, and when they even breathe, they're releasing tension. That's a healthier nervous system.
Sure.
So those are the questions you have to ask. Do you know what a healthy nervous system looks like, feels like? Have you ever experienced one or not? Most people can't even remember when they could openly breathe and freely move.
Yeah, and even in delivery rooms, from the very first moment of life outside mom, trauma already happens.
Yeah, I've adjusted some newborns that were not thriving, and it can be a very light contact right at the brain stem, and all of a sudden a big breath, color in the face, and everything changes in their lives.
Yeah. And so this kind of work entails almost one better connection, better integration of systems, a better understanding and better energetic accuracy even. So what I've seen you also do in the past is say pick up a supplement and you hold it and you go, this brings me that rapport, that brings me that release of tension, or doesn't.
Or creates more tension.
And so I see a lot of people doing the old, this version of AK or the lean forward, lean back version, but I don't know that their nervous systems are integrated enough to understand and get an accurate result out of that.
Yeah, right.
And so this is where
I would agree with you.
If your body can't be trusted to be accurate and beneficial for you until you have your nervous system unwound and have that tension released and able to then not be hyper responsive to something, or in case of some people that test things and everything tests positive for them, this is great, it's a desperation of please help me, that seems to be the positive test for them. So there's you can't necessarily rely on your accuracy until you have things lined up correctly.
That's right.
So that's been an observation of mine over the years, and I have all kinds of people come in and they say, here's this boatload of bags and cartons full of product that I bought at the store because I saw it online or whatever else, and it tests terrible on it. Well, I tested it myself and it tested well. No, you didn't test very well, Your Honor, because you weren't really you. You weren't the core, accurate, balanced you doing that test.
Right.
Which again, that's nothing I've seen you do. And again, you've worked on infants, you've worked on elderly, you've worked on all different conditions. What was the most extreme condition you've treated?
That brain injury person was pretty huge. I've had a number of other people on that order of things. I had someone with MS and doesn't have it anymore. And
can't use a certain word there, but they no longer have it. So, well, then what does that mean?
The nervous system got in a healthier place, and whatever MS is actually went away.
Yeah, well, for my practice, it isn't any one thing. So
Yeah, there you go.
there's that.
There you go. Yeah.
So I guess,
But just to add, I mean, I saw a need while I was in practice. A number of people really needed more work of the kind I do, and they couldn't necessarily afford it, or they just needed, tons of work. And I was able to start showing their spouse, for example, what to do and to take the next steps, so that by the time I saw them again, their nervous system had a forward momentum going, and I was able to take that and run with that and show them how to do that. I realized everyone should know, how to assess a nervous system. Because how do you know how healthy you really are or not? Right.
and we have a family that we both work on.
Yeah.
And the entire family got together and everybody just learned this technique and treat each other at home
Yeah.
on a routine basis, and they keep themselves pretty healthy just by virtue of, hey, and the one thing I've noticed, especially about one of that family, is that when I test her, her body responds to a minimum amount of support.
Right.
And homeopathic, like one homeopathic can take care of what would somebody else would have to buy 12 bottles of stuff. She buys one homeopathic and boom, she's back on, because her body's so integrated.
Yeah.
So it's able to take the message from the homeopathic and just do cascades of action.
Yes, and that's a sign of a healthy nervous system.
So that's kind of the thing I think would be a good goal for anybody, is to kind of get involved in this work and be able to treat oneself or treat one's loved ones in a way that then all of that ends up being a lifestyle. Let's just say it's a regular and routine thing to do, is to say, I'm going to, I take digestive enzymes and I take vitamins and I take this for my kidneys and this for my lungs. Well, what are you doing for your nervous system?
Right.
How could you make that routine maintenance just part of your day? I think that'd be a good thing to look at.
Yeah.
So, again, with all of this wrapped up, you have this technique and you have this stuff, and we're going to, try to take advantage of having you instruct some of our people.
Yeah.
How could somebody then further look into this? How could somebody contact you? How could somebody learn this technique outside of our HHP course that we're offering?
Well, through my contact information. Yeah. Well, drmstern@gmail.com. Or
through the IHHA. What we can do is, if as time goes on, if we can encourage you, we can maybe have you teach some more advanced classes.
Oh, sure.
IHHA.
Sure.
We'd love to be able to have that available for patients to do. Let's learn how to do this work on our own and spread it around a little bit. Let's have more people experience this, and because the more tuned up people we have, the easier it is on everybody. So my techniques work better on somebody who's already tuned up. Well, what about that person who's doing the advanced stretching or emotional work or whatever other kind of technique that's involved? Somebody's going to get better. Their diet will work better when their nervous system is lined up and understands the food better. Things like this. So that's hopefully we can kind of rope you in, I guess. We can get you involved, and we can get you working with some more people too. So I think that's a good conversation for today. I thank you for being here.
Sure.
It's always a pleasure.
Sure.
And so we'll kind of keep things rolling here. We might hear from you again. But for now, I think we've got a good idea, at least kind of how your system works, and a better idea about the nervous system and the integration with other things in the body. We just need to have that holistic view. And without understanding that the nervous system is integrated and connected with every cell in the body, how could we possibly be holistic if we weren't including the nervous system?
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. And if people have questions, they've got your email. They can send them over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, dear listeners, that brings us to the end of this episode of the IHHA Quadcast. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and that it sparked your curiosity about the importance of taking care of your nervous system. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and follow us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. This simple act can help us reach more curious minds just like yours. Now, a special announcement for next week's episode that you won't want to miss. We're thrilled to have our Director of Science and Research and the co-founder of the IHHA, Dr. Abdel Al-Khalouf, taking the reins on our next Quadcast. He'll be sitting down with none other than Steve Krasuski. It's shaping up to be a profound conversation, brimming with knowledge and wisdom, and probably laced with a little bit of humor that's sure to keep you both entertained and laughing, all thanks to these two remarkable individuals. So mark your calendars, set your reminders, and tune in next week for this riveting conversation. Remember, curiosity keeps our minds engaged and our hearts passionate about learning. Until then, take care and thank you for being a part of our IHHA community. All right, folks, fasten your seatbelts and put on your best lawyer impression because it's time for the moment you've all been eagerly waiting for, the legal mumbo jumbo. Remember, it's not just words, it's the secret language that keeps us out of the courtroom and in the webinar room. So let's dive in. The information presented today is not to be considered diagnostic and should be used for educational purposes only. It should not be interpreted as medical advice. The Food and Drug Administration has not evaluated any statements in this webinar. Neither content nor attachments in this webinar are meant to treat, cure, prevent, or diagnose any disease. Please, as always, see your medical doctor for diagnosis and disease recommendations.